jump in a second here. I'm still letting folks in, but I think we can get started. My name is Tafira Rushton. Let me change my name on my screen so you can see my actual name. Um, Everybody calls me T. If I haven't met you yet, I'm excited to meet you. These classes are a part of Keep Growing Detroit, which most people are probably members of Keep Growing Detroit, but if you're not, we operate a farm down in Eastern Market, and we also have a program called the Garden Resource Program where we support gardeners across the city. So hopefully you all are members or you're thinking about being members, so you can get some seeds and plants and support for your garden. In addition to those things, we also do all kind of classes. So we're happy that you're joining us today. This class is a very special class. One of my favorites. It's a part of our business series. We've decided to focus on all things business related during the winter months. So we've been going through accounting best practices. We've been talking about business entity types. If you've missed some of those are all on our YouTube page. This is the last in the series. We've also been doing some like value added product stuff last Saturday. And then we'll jump into farm planning next. So all things to get your business together, your farm business together. I am joined by Ashley Atkinson. She is a fellow co-director at Keep Growing Detroit and also is in charge of our finances and fundraising. So she plays a very important role at the organization and is here to share with you some tips that she's learned along the way. I think we got everyone in the room, so I think we can go ahead and get started. And Ashley says she prefers you just jump right in. If you have a question, feel free to come off of mute, or if you prefer to stay in the chat, I can relay the question for you as well. So,
okay, you ready to get started?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Just the other thing is the collective wisdom in the room I know is very, very high. So if anybody wants to chime in at any point with a different perspective or an idea about a resource, throw a resource in the chat, please do. It's a collective knowledge kind of situation. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, geez, that's not the one that I wanted. Okay, can you see something that says cultivating a food sovereign Detroit together?
Yes, yep.
Great, and I'm gonna get rid of that and I'm gonna present.
Perfect.
Okay, T, I also put a couple links in the chat box because we're gonna, there are links embedded in this presentation, but if you could share them in the chat at that time, then folks will have access to it as well. So I just really wanted to start by saying that I've been kind of checking out the business series the classes in the business series, and they're really great, great classes for folks, at every stage of business development. So, I definitely learned some things checking those classes out about how to file taxes, so that you're recouping some of your business expenses, in your taxes, some great ideas about like the rules related to value-added products, and that value-added kind of Michigan cottage industry class was really, really great. Filing taxes, if that seems to be, kind of something that feels cumbersome, or like, you might not be able, to get through it without a little bit of assistance. There are just some really, really great classes in the series, and I hope that the information I'm presenting today is complementary to them. So let's get started. So the first thing that I want to share is how important it is that you have a clear vision. Um,
Hey,
this is about,
actually, we don't see anything on the screen. Is
oh,
everybody else, is other people seeing? I don't see it.
okay, let's see.
Okay, I want to make sure before you got too far.
Yeah, no, that's good. Maybe it doesn't work that way in Canva. Hold on.
Yeah, Happy New Year, Gary. Hey, Althea.
Okay, so we're just gonna look at it this way.
Happy New Year.
Oh, it says screen sharing failed to start. So, oopsie. Okay, can you see it now, T?
Yes, it's on.
Okay.
What's your vision? Yep.
Okay, I'm just gonna have to uh, do this and this. Okay, so first things first, what's your vision? It's just like a product that is you're marketing. So there's so many different, products, hamburgers in the market, and a lot of the work of being a successful hamburger business is, really making sure that like you're telling the story of your hamburger and making people like really really want to connect with it and like try it, right? So some of that is like storytelling. How did your hamburger come to be? What's in it? Some of it is photos, so people can kind of visualize what you're saying. But like if you really really want to raise funds for your initiative, you got to connect with people, because that's essentially who you're asking support from. So in order to connect with people, you need a super super strong vision. So what is a vision and how do you kind of create one? The first thing to do is to kind of send yourself to the future. So essentially, if you have like a meditation process, or if you think in the shower, or you think on a walk, really spend some time thinking about, when I'm successful trying to do what I'm trying to do, what will it look like? Who will be there? What will it feel like? um, if you can kind of tell a story about when you're successful, what the future looks like, then that's a great great start to a vision. And you may be thinking like, oh well, my project isn't, it isn't quite there yet. I don't I you know Vision will come later, but really vision is always changing. It's a work in progress. Your vision today is not going to be exactly your vision in 3 years. Same thing with Keep Growing Detroit. We have a pretty clear vision, but the way that we're thinking about it grows in complexity, as our food ecosystem grows in complexity. It's always going to be changing and kind of adapting to the world around it, right? But it's really really important to be able to articulate what you're trying to accomplish. So get yourself in the future, visualize, and then start to be able to articulate that. Think about the work that you're embarking on and quickly list past positive achievement that seem related to it. So you're trying to do this in the future, and here are the things that you've got under your belt, the steps that you've taken in order to be the right person or the right team of people to shepherd this vision into reality. Right for the heart, from the heart, your if you try to capture what you think it should say, or what you think a funder will go for, or a person you don't know will go for, you're really missing out on like the best resource that you have, which is your lived experience. Make sure that your lived experience, your passion, you wouldn't be doing this if you weren't passionate about it. So make sure that your lived experience and your passion is ringing through your vision. And don't get too kind of caught up in the moment and intimidated by it, right? Like even people with like super strong writing skills are not going to come out of the gate with a perfect vision written down. So like, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Just start thinking about it, start with a hot pen or, some other writing exercise just to get it on paper. You're going to go through multiple revisions, right? So read it through, keep it in the back of your mind, share it with people, get input, ask them if it sounds clear, ask them if it sounds inspiring, and if you don't think it's clear and inspiring, and if your friends and family don't think that it's inspiring, keep working at it. And again, like, it's a living document, so either way you're going to be working at it. Ask people whose your opinion you value to look at it, and get ideas from them. And then when you're ready to share your vision, make sure that you're really kind of able to articulate it, and all of your stakeholders, try to make sure that they have resources to easily share your story and articulate your vision, so that they can help be kind of your cheerleaders. So this all is adapted from The Power of Visioning from Zingerman's, who has an excellent, if you feel really stumped, Zingerman's does have like a training, like a business school, and they do, a half-day long training on how to do a vision. And, if you're stuck, it might be a good idea to, help yourself with a little bit of training from some folks that have done some really great things with business.
Mhm.
So
Is
let
that
me
one of
just
the
share.
links you wanted me to post?
Oh, I'm sorry, T. That one is just this link. If you wanna, here, I'll grab it and get it in.
Okay.
Oh, I'll get it. Oh, here it is. Okay.
Oh,
Chat.
sorry. I didn't mean to throw you off.
Okay.
I was just trying to get those links in if you wanted them.
Okay. Back to the presentation. Okay. Here we go. Oh. Okay. Everybody see your vision?
Yes.
Okay, so here's two examples just to kind of share what I'm talking about. So example one, my vision is to fortify a connection to where food comes from as a means to instill self-determination, self-sufficiency, and improve physical and mental health in and for the Pingree neighborhood. So that's one. And then to share Keep Growing Detroit's vision, KGD's vision is that there are places to grow food in every neighborhood in Detroit that help maximize community and economic development opportunities that benefit residents. So two examples, just to be able to kind of very quickly share what you're trying to accomplish. In your vision, you definitely want to be thinking about what are your values, and also as you're like creating your business plan and your fundraising strategies, just being clear on values is really important. Everyone kind of has personal values, but when you're doing this work, oftentimes it's not just as an individual, you're collaborating with other people. And so having discussions about values really early on is a really good thing to do, because you don't want to get, into a situation where you're like communicating with a potential funder or sponsor, and you're not agreeing about whether it's a good fit. So you just want to be on the same page about values before before you get too far along, and make sure that your vision and essentially your the proposal documents that you have are reflecting your values, so that it's just super clear. Also, your capacity. This is a really, really important one. I feel like we have a lot of conversations with folks that have like this amazing vision, and it's huge and it's transformative, and I really connect with it, and I'm like instantly a supporter of what they're trying to do, and then I understand that there's this disconnect between what they want to do this year and what their capacity is, and I start thinking like, oh wow, I don't know. That sounds too big, and I'm not sure if I can. Even though I really support the big picture and where they want to go with this, I feel a little worried about investing, because this sounds like something that they've never ever gotten close to doing, and it's scary. So I think it's important to like really think big, and have that vision, that transformative vision, but to be able to, at every turn say, this is the big picture, but here are the steps that that we want to bite off this year in order to get closer to that big picture, and just make sure that they really match. Indicators of capacity would be things like lived experience. If you, for example, if you are, wanting to end homelessness in Detroit, and you actually were unhoused for, a period in your life, like you have so much information in order to understand the issues and navigate the issues and solve the issues, right? So, definitely lean into lived experience. It's super valuable. Make sure your storytelling, and when you're talking about your vision, that it's front and center. Your social capital, in Detroit especially, it's who you know. So much of how you're able to like access resource and opportunities is who you know, and just taking stock of your social capital, and and just really utilizing it. Don't be afraid to, right? That's just how the world works. And at its core, it's reciprocity, which is an ancient form of economy. That's how, before there was printed money, right, people exchanged goods and services in their social network. And at its core, that's what this is. Also, the resources that you have, the physical resources, the organizational resources are also part of capacity. And again, like, you'll build capacity year after year after year. Just kind of make sure what you're planning to do each year is the right size bite for your capacity. Okay.
Hey, Ashley,
Yeah.
when you go on present mode, does it, they were asking if you can make the slides bigger.
Yeah. Let me see. I'll try again. See. Oh, you want to know something I can do really quick? Hold on. Just give me 2 secs. Sorry for the technical difficulties, guys. I'm downloading a copy, and I'll just run it from the copy. Okay, let's see if this works.
Dr. Foreman, she said, thank you. She's on a mobile device, so this will help.
No problem. Okay, how are we looking now?
Perfect. That looks good.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so now we're getting into the nitty gritty. So the process of acquiring resources for your project. The first is project planning. Typically, we do a lot of our project planning year by year on an annual basis, but there's also strategic planning that's looking at 5-year, 10-year, 20-year goals. And if your vision is really, really ambitious, sometimes it'll take 20 years or even longer to achieve. And so a lot of times people have both a short-term kind of annual plan, and then they also have a longer-term kind of strategic plan, and they're just kind of updating the long-term plan at year after year. So once the plan is there, then you're going to have a lot of information to create a budget. We're going to go through all of these steps in more detail. Once you have a plan and you know kind of what resources you need to you'll be generating and what expenses you'll have, then you need to figure out how to cover any gaps that you have with potential revenue sources. Then once you've identified some, you have to actually go after them and secure them and be ready for them. And then once you've secured them, there's lots to do related to fund management and making sure you have good financial records. You have good narrative records, photos, surveys, things to kind of document what you've accomplished with the funds. So every step of the way, it's smart to have smart objectives or details woven into your plans. So SMART is an acronym. It stands for specific. So you want to make sure that you have a really clear description of what you hope to achieve. It's measurable, so it includes metrics that indicate success. So a metric would be something like you want to not just create a raised bed garden, but that you want to create a raised bed garden with 2 4x8 raised beds, that are 10 inches tall, right? Then you can really visualize, right? When I say I want to create a raised bed garden, I'm sure everybody's head visualize something different. Some people, visualize one raised bed and it was really simple. Other people visualized 10 raised beds and they're really fancy, right? So you really want to make sure that you're able to put some of these kind of smart, specific things in your vision. Achievable, right? So back to capacity, it's challenging, but it's within reach. And then relevant, why it's important, right? Like how it connects to the people you're talking to, why it's important for the world. And then time bound. You want to create a raised bed garden with 2 raised beds by March 1st. So when you start to add those details, something that could be, really anything in anyone's imagination becomes clear, pretty crystal clear. You really get on the same page in terms of what the vision is. So then you create a project plan. So a project plan includes activities. So kind of keeping in line with the example of a family garden, a raised bed family garden. The activities would be the steps to complete the project. So you want to say, okay, in order to achieve my vision of a family raised bed garden, I'm going to need to draw a plot plan. I'm going to have to clean up the backyard. I'm going to have to, order and pick up the materials. I'm going to have to build the raised beds and I'm going to have to fill them up. Timeline, when will you complete each activity? You're going to, look at the first frost-free date, right? Like when can you get out there, first in the spring. You want to look at, like, for example, what the GRP cold crop distribution date is, make sure if you want cold crops that your raised beds are built by then. You're going to have to look at those activities closely and figure out what supplies you need. So there are going to always be some things that you have and some things that you need. So take stock in the things that you have. So you have tools and shovels and the things that you need, the lumber, the water sealant, hardware, compost, topsoil. Then you're gonna, in addition to supplies, look at your people power, the labor that it's gonna take to do the implementation. So you may have questions about how to build a raised bed, and so maybe you'll call Keep Growing Detroit and the garden development team and see if you can get your hands on a raised bed building flyer, or if you have a specific question about a soil test, that how to take a soil sample, maybe reach out for some advice. But on the day of the build, hopefully you have an uncle or somebody in the family that can help put in a little bit of sweat equity. And then there's
uncle or an aunt.
Or aunt, right? I mean, definitely an aunt.
Just joking.
Yeah, in my experience, the aunts will help with anything, but when power tools, uncles just come out of the woodwork. So then, and then the costs. So funds needed for supplies and labor, right? So you inventory the things you have, and now you know the things you need, and you can kind of just start turning that into a budget.
Mhm. In your experience, like, do they want to see that level of detail, like your project plan? Um, Maybe it's dependent on the size of the funder. I'm not sure. Like, what do you think?
Yes, almost always. So I think, it's always practice to figure out how to gauge the level of interest that that people are interested in receiving. So sometimes funders are super clear, like not only that they need to see kind of a project plan, and project plans. Everything that I just went over is like essentially the, uh, the fundamental piece of a grant application. In a grant, you're always going to say, what do you want to accomplish, i.e. vision? What are the steps that you want to take right now, i.e. activities, right? And what, who's going to do them, all the details. So how are you going to get done? And then what's it going to cost?
So
Um,
would you recommend that folks have like project plans in place even before they're seeking funding? Like, or
100%.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And if you don't, you don't want to be caught without having done this homework, because again, you're never gonna. Sometimes you'll know exactly what the person or institution you're asking resources for, what level of detail they want, but sometimes you won't, and then you'll start a conversation, or you'll start an application process, and you'll just kind of be caught without having thought through these things. um,
Hmm.
the other thing is like, essentially, uh, a lot of times asking for resources is somewhat like kind of a contractual arrangement. And so, even if it's a conversation with an individual donor, you'll say, yeah, I'm going to build this raised bed garden, and I'm going to do 2 raised beds, and it's going to, I just need $100 to do it. And then they'll be like, cool, that's a deal. Here's $100. And then you'll get into it, and you'll start, getting your stuff, and you'll, get so far along, and you'll be like, damn, this is going to take $200. I told this person I can do it with 100. Like, I need $100 more, or I'm not going to get this done. And I'm going to be in a situation where I'm kind of in quote unquote default. So you really want to have the process as thought out as possible, the activities as thought out as possible, and all of that detail will really help to daylight your budget. Um, does any
One other thing I just thought of just in the conversation of like another thing that I see happen with folks is that they're like, they may start off with like, okay, I just want to do 2 raised beds. And then they see, a funding opportunity that may take them in a whole different direction, right? So they're like, okay, I want to do a couple raised beds for my community garden, but they see this fundraising opportunity for, working with 10 youth or something like that. So now they're got, now they got to do both things, and then their capacity kind of wavers. Um, yeah,
Yeah, it happens all the time. And I will
yeah,
tell you, in the long run, if you stick with your plan, you're so much more likely to like knock it out of the park, that your reputation then will become, in the long run, oh, this person knocks it out of the park every single time. And
that part.
yeah, and in the long run, you're going to have way more longevity, than if you get distracted by the sparkly things. You'll end up at a destination you never even you never even wanted to be at. It wasn't part of your vision, but you just followed the money. And
Yeah,
it, and it
yeah.
and unfortunately, it happens all the time. It also, when you do that, is a source of a lot of conflict with the people that you're working with,
Mm,
because oftentimes those decisions are made kind of in the moment, and you work hard at like creating a plan, and you get people on board, and then you're like, oh, sorry guys, new destination. And it really, it's exhausting. So just be really careful about quote unquote unintended opportunities.
yeah, that's a good point. Good point. Okay.
So T, on the on this slide, there is a there's a link for folks to our
Okay.
project and budgeting templates. So the link gets you to the Google Doc in View, and you can just make a copy. And if you find it helpful, you'll see in the tabs, in addition to this worksheet, there's a cash flow worksheet, there's a budget tracker. So hopefully it's helpful. And I love budgeting. T knows this, but maybe you all will learn this about me tonight. I love budgeting, and so I'm always down to help people with their budgets. Um, so just like other parts of the business series that T has been working so hard on, I tried to do 3 different budgets today to kind of show you a for-profit business that's doing services, a for-profit business that's doing products, and a nonprofit business that's doing a community garden. So when you're doing budgeting, right, you have your revenue portion of the budget, and you have your expense portion of the budget. And the big picture is that you want to subtract your expenses from your revenue and hopefully have a profit. And sometimes it works that way and sometimes it doesn't. This is a perfect example about visioning, and the difference between like an annual project plan and a strategic plan. Um, the first years of a business, there's going to be startup expenses. And, like that, those first years, especially if you need like equipment and things that are kind of, pretty big expenses to get rolling, you're going to need, you're going to need to be really, really careful about budgeting. You're going to need to seek, some support, likely from outside sources, and so the first few years you may actually have a net loss, and it might not be profitable. But if if you have a 5-year plan, to the point so that you are a little, you're not profitable for the first year, you're a little less you're a little more profitable the next year, and then ultimately you're earning some pretty good profits, then the first couple of years will be worth it. So it's nice to do an annual budget. It's also nice to do like a 3-year or 4-year budget, just as you're as you're working on your annual and your strategic plan.
I want
Okay.
to give a real world example there. I'm on the Detroit People's School Co-op Finance Committee, so I'm working with their budgets all the time, and in their performer for the grocery store, they won't be profitable till like year 3 or 4. Not that they won't be able to keep the lights on and all of that, but like, so yeah, I just wanted to give that example of like, yes, everybody, everybody's in that situation,
Yeah,
especially small businesses.
and the good news is a lot of people really understand that. And they understand that like community-based businesses need a little hand to get started. And um and there are a lot of resources out there to to help with some of the kind of startup capital, the purchase of a stove, or the purchase of a piece of equipment that's integral to your business. And it's really, if you're making those types of asks, even more important to be able to articulate your vision and how you're going to get there. But let's get into Woody's raised bed building services. So Woody is an excellent carpenter, has built raised beds for themselves and everyone in their family, and they get great feedback that they're so helpful. And people's gardens, which they love so much, wouldn't be possible without Woody's support. So Woody's like, I'm bored on the weekends and I want to make some extra cash. And so, and I think I could provide this really essential service for our community, and use my talents to do this important and essential work. So Woody comes up with a plan. It's pretty, reasonable. Over the course of a growing season, he's going to build he's going to build raised beds at 10 sites, and he's going to get about $750 from each of these 10 sites. And then he's going to help 5 sites repair raised beds that are old and need a new board or some sanding or new hardware. So he's going to do 5 projects at $100 for $500. revenue. Then he's going to start this new idea of garden tending services. So he's going to, do a pilot with one project, doing 2 site visits per month at $50 per visit for 6 months in the growing season for $600 revenue. And then his abilities are so sought after, he's going to teach 2 carpentry, raised bed building courses this year for $100 each. So Woody's revenue is $8,800. And his expenses are some, wear and tear on his vehicle. He wants to charge $100 to his business for that. Marketing communications. He knows how to build a website with a template, but he'll need to get the template and the fee, the domain fees. Plus, he's going to get a truck detail for advertising for, that should be $600. Always have this is just a catch to make sure you have an editor for your budgets. Travel, he's going to do 29 trips at 20 miles each trip for $500. And then he's going to have to pay some taxes on his contractual work, so $450. Seasonal labor, he's going to hire his neighbor Larry to help with some of the larger builds that he has. So that's going to eat up some of his profits at $2,000. Logo design, $200. Garden tending pilot. He wants to have some extra seeds and plants on hand to do that service for that one homeowner. He needs some topsoil and some lumber, and then also he has some tools, but he needs to add some tools and to his repertoire. So $50. So Woody's total expenses are $5,478. So his profit will be $3,022. So does this budget make sense to folks? Any questions about budgeting?
I love it because that budget detail is coming straight from his plan, right? I feel
Yeah.
like that's where people are like, how do I get to that number?
Yep.
And it's like all about having that plan first of like, okay, like you said, I want to do 10 projects and I want to do, and that's based on me doing 5 this year. I think I could double that, based on my capacity. Like you can really see in the narrative, you know, that coming straight off of his plan, for the next year.
Yep.
I love
Yep.
that.
Exactly. And and this is also a great tool to kind of get a sense of like, okay, so Woody's going to be profitable, but if he needed to buy a truck, he would not be profitable, right? And so he'd have to like go look for some capital. Also, like, he might not have the startup costs, right? You have to, like the old adage, you have to spend money to make money. He might not have, the money in his pocket for the first project that, he'll after it's done, he'll bill people and then he'll be paid and then he'll have a little working capital. But he might have to like put some of the expenses on his credit card to start with, and in order to kind of just get the cash flow that he needs in order to start getting some of this profit coming in. Also, there's opportunities to do things like offset some of these costs. So, it's again, going back to social capital, like you could call around to see like where the best topsoil place is, like the best quality product and with the lowest price, and that could shave $300 off of the budget, right? If you do your market research. And then there's things like the marketing and communications, like you may be able to find a local artist that'll do it for free, or there's a lot of different organizations that have some like Prosperous and Build Institute, right? Business development classes that have like startup grants for startup businesses and stuff for folks that do business planning with them. So, there's like looking at this, it becomes so manageable, and you can really start to see like, where are there opportunities for me to ask for some help here? So
Yeah, or if it's not, if it's not working, maybe I need to increase the projects that I'm doing or decrease the project. You can kind of play with it. Leslie had a question in the chat about what about budgeting the time toward doing the work versus the time needed to make the actual living. So like, how do you budget in your labor costs? I think that's what I think
Yeah.
that's what that boils
So
down to.
that's super, super important. And again, like budgets are just like visions, they're kind of, working documents. So what I would do is after I would do the first project if I were Woody. And I would keep meticulous track of my actual expenses, and my labor, my labor costs. So you might finish your first project, and then the next time someone asks for a quote, the prices might be much different because you're like, oh, it takes twice as long as I thought, or I actually need two people, not one person, in order to make this work. And so if you're in real time like monitoring those costs, and then adjusting them, then you're going to make sure you're like putting quotes out that actually make you profitable. Or you figure out that there's no way to make profit doing this, and you kind of switch gears, doing something else.
Good point.
So
Good point.
you just want to keep really, really good documents, and you want to continuously kind of improve your knowledge. But the thing about businesses is like you got to have a little courage, right? Like you got to step out for the first time, and put yourself out there and do a job. And I can guarantee you the first time you do something is not going to be as good or perfect as the second time, as the third time. You got to build up your abilities, to get this right. And that's where capacity comes in. Again, like when people purport to be able to do something that's way bigger than they've ever done before, there's a reason why people are like, that doesn't sound reasonable. So after the first year, Woody's going to be able to like talk about his services and how much they cost way, way more specifically, and with greater knowledge than than he did before he started.
Something I was thinking about this morning, as you're flipping slides was, I was thinking about budgets this morning in the shower, actually.
Yes.
And we're in our budgeting week at Keep Growing Detroit, and getting our budget passed by our board, which is annually. Um, and so I was thinking about how like budgets, particularly for small nonprofits or small businesses, they're like a contract. They're like a agreement between the parties. Basically, it's like a marriage. It's like, okay, Ashley, this is what we're agreeing to. We're gonna put it on paper. You and I are gonna do 10 projects together. Here's what expenses. And I always like in the other organizations that I work for, I'm like, um, if you need to go outside of the budget, then we need to have a conversation. You know what I mean? Like this is what we've agreed to, this is what makes sense on paper, and then like let's come back to the table if we need to do something outside of this. But it gives us an agreement between us, even beyond the numbers. It's about like being in community together, and like just agreeing that this is how we're going to move together.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely think if you go into this work with the spirit of like there's enough resources for everybody, we just gotta like we just gotta come to the table and get this important work done. I think I think the resources, I call me an optimist. I think that the resources will be there if you do the work collaboratively with transparency, with integrity.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, so the next budget we're looking at is pretty similar, but it's a different, it's a product. So it's a for-profit business called Winter Slumber Herbal Teas. You guys can take any of these ideas as you want. I feel like I could, just generate a million budgets because it's just fun for me. So Winter Slumber Teas is going to sell individual bags of tea, mixed packs of their different blends, gift boxes, which include some teas, and then also some like steepers, and maybe a kettle or something to make it look real cute, maybe some honey from Grown in Detroit, tea making workshops, and then tours of their tea farm. So they're going to make 5,000 from the individual teas, 1,250 for the mix packs, 1,000 for the boxes. You get the sense. $8,550 profit. But it's pretty manageable, right? It's like it's 500 bags. That shouldn't have a dollar sign. I need another editor on my budget. It's 500 bags of tea at $10, 25 packs of tea at $50, or the mix packs at $50. So it's 525 kind of packs of tea. It's pretty reasonable. Like you could probably do this from your garden. Marketing communications, they don't feel comfortable making a website, so they're gonna need someone to help build that a website. They're gonna do some ad spaces in a couple of local foodie publications. They're gonna do a farmers market. They're going to ship some of their teas. They need the small farmers market stall rental fee and some logo design. They need some herbs, seeds, and plants. They have an established garden, so they're just kind of, it's a little bit of expense adding to it. They need some expenses to start their farmers market stand, tablecloth and some baskets. They need their bags and labels for their tea product, and then they want to invest in a new dehydrator and screens. So they do have a pretty big upfront investment, but once it's paid off, it's gonna, they're gonna use it year after year after year. So their expenses are $5,700. So their profit is $2,837. So just kind of looking at the big picture here. I love budgets because they tell a story. Like, I feel like I know winter slumber herbal teas, right? Like if you're doing it well, you really get like, oh, I totally see this business. It's cute. I can almost visualize the label. And
And this is what funders are looking for, like clarity. I feel like
yeah.
if I'm gonna give you money for your project, right, I want to know that you have thought it through and it's reasonable, right? So yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
And Sandra said this is helping her with her vision. Said that in the
Good.
chat.
Good, fantastic. And this is also like one of those places where like, having done your research really shows or doesn't show. So like if you like some of these things, so for example, like $350, $150 for tablecloths and baskets. Oh, a funder might be like, that's not very much money, but you might be like, I love to shop at thrift stores, and why would I buy things new, right? So there may be some questions. You may want to like put that detail in your plan. It doesn't necessarily have to be in your budget, but there definitely may be some things. If you do have a reviewer, they'll be able to pick things out that basically feel like, oh, that feels like too much or not enough. Because if they pick it out, then there's likely someone else reviewing will pick it out, and you just want to be able to explain it or do a little bit more market research to find a better price. But the thing here that I would, definitely pick up is like there are resources for folks that like need help, doing a new website. This could be like a student project for somebody at CCS, who's got a semester project to do a website. That happens all the time. Also things like the dehydrator. There's plenty of places, like Eastern Market used to have a small grants program that paid for equipment for food businesses to do capacity building, and stuff like that exists all the time. And so this just really helps you cherry pick, like, what are those upfront costs that will make it hard for me to launch this business that I maybe be able to get help with, or what are those things I can put off that aren't essential right now, that when I have some cash flow, I can do at that point. Last but not least, we have Green Park Community Garden and Food Hub. So Green Park earns revenue in a couple ways. They have a membership fee with 20 families just paying $5 each. They have t-shirts, so $25. They must have bought the t-shirts last year because they're not in the expenses. Oops. So they're just like making money on t-shirts they printed last year. And then they have a grant from a neighborhood improvement organization. Their expenses are their Garden Resource Program membership, so $30 annually. They have to pay their property taxes, their summer and winter property taxes. They have to pay a neighbor for water. So those are their kind of operating costs. Their contractual services, so the money that they're paying for contractual labor. 5 youth will be working in the garden throughout the summer, but good news, there's the GDYT, the Growing Detroit Young Talent City program, that will cover the stipends for those youth. Then there's adult stipends, because youth tend to need to be supervised or supported by adults. So 2 adults working with the youth 60 hours each for $25 an hour. So $3,000. Plants and seeds. We do have our GRP membership, plants and seeds, so that really reduces what we need. But Green Park really loves their annual flowers, and they can't give them up completely, so they do spend about $300 a year on annual flowers. They are actually working with the Sierra Club to install a native flower garden at the space for some rainwater collection and curb appeal. So that's actually covered by that partnership. They need some gardening gloves and first aid kit supplies. They're getting their compost from the GRP and 2 raised beds from the GRP, so that's also covered. And then they need to buy a new tool shed. So their expenses are $5,675. And so they have a little bit of profit that they're going to roll over to the next year. And as we know, nonprofits, what they do with their profit is invested back into the organization for subsequent work. And so they do have a little bit of some profit that they're going to roll into next year's budget. Any questions about the nonprofit budget?
I don't know if you're able to do it while you're presenting, but there were folks who couldn't access the Google Doc. So if you can't, we can do it after the class.
Okay.
But,
Yeah. What does it say when you try
it's
to
like
access?
they requested access. So
It says it's set to anybody with a link. So I'll try to troubleshoot when we're done, T. But are some people getting in?
I got in, so I didn't know, maybe it's so weird. But no, TC says he couldn't get in either.
Okay.
Yeah. And one thing I will also say, as you're scrolling, is the line items to the left. We talked about that in a previous class, like how to how to get to these line items that you're tracking, and how to name them. But for folks who may have missed the other classes, do you want to say anything about, like, why you picked these
Yeah,
categories? And
I love that question. You know me, the chart of accounts. So the beautiful thing about those what we call categories or items on the left, so membership fees, t-shirts, grants, is that essentially, as you kind of start implementing your vision, you kind of get in the rhythm of saying, like, oh, like, I'll just talk about KGD because that's the thing I know the most, right? Like, we have the garden research program. We always buy seeds. We always buy compost. We always buy lumber and hardware. We always buy tools, right? Like, those are things that we buy every single year. And so because they're core to our business, we want to make sure that we're thinking about them as items we have to account for, and we're thinking about how those expenses are changing over time. So for example, this is I think a great example is so something like strawberries. So strawberries, some years we considered a live seed and it went in seed. And sometimes we considered strawberry a perennial plant and it went in perennials. And so because we were putting strawberries in like 2 different areas, it was hard for us to track, like, how much do we spend on strawberries? Like, how much money do we have to raise for strawberries? What's the price of strawberries doing? Do I need to look for another vendor? Can I afford it this year? I can answer all of those questions if I have consistency in where strawberry shows up in my budget. And the thing that helps us find consistency is once you're familiar with your business and you really know, here are the ways that I make money consistently, and here are the things that I spend money consistently on. That becomes the core of your chart of accounts, and essentially the chart of accounts is that column to the left.
Okay, thank you for that. So we're gonna try to track that, keep that consistent and track that from year to year,
Yep.
basically, is what you're
Yep.
saying.
And
Yeah.
it can change, but just be really careful when it does change, because a business will change, and you'll add like new services, right? And so you have new revenue categories, and sometimes you're like, this isn't profitable anymore, so I'm going to take this revenue category off. It can change, but just try to keep it as consistent as possible. That'll
Mhm.
help you with your trending, and with your like, it'll make the budgeting process go much faster. It'll help you get like really dial in your expenses and your revenue and your fee schedule.
Mhm. Okay, and then quick question before we go on, from Tish in the chat. She says, do you need to be a nonprofit to get an employee stipend? And we did talk about some of the reporting requirements. I would suggest you go look at those videos, but Ashley, do you want to speak to that?
um to okay, help me understand the question. Do you need to be a nonprofit to receive an employee stipend?
Mhm.
So are we talking about like the adult stipend here?
Tish, do you want to come off and mute and
Yeah.
Hi.
clarify? There you go.
Well, the adult or the youth, I just need some help, and I don't, people don't want to volunteer, and my business is a for-profit, so I just wondered, do you need to be a nonprofit in order to get the uh, stipend uh, from stipend help?
Yeah, so for Growing Detroit Young Talent, you do not. In fact, many of the major corporations in the city have youth employees that are 100% funded by this nonprofit public partnership. So anyone can apply for GDYT, and T is an expert. Well, is it safe to say expert in the program, T?
Okay, do you have any links for that, where that would be?
You got it, T?
Yeah, actually, the GDYT request for proposal is out right now and it's due this in February 3rd. So let me pull it up. I was pulling up some YouTube videos for someone else in the chat, but I can pull up that RFP link or email it to you directly, Tish. I think it's a whole like packet, so I'm gonna have to email it to you.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then in terms of adult stipends, sometimes I would consider that a another word for adult stipend would be, volunteers. And so like, if you're looking for something more consistent, or if you're having trouble recruiting volunteers, maybe think about like a partnership with a school, or a college program, or an institution where you can develop a like organizational partnership with that institution, and it will be their responsibility to recruit volunteers consistently for your site. There's been a number of examples of how like that's worked really, really well, because businesses or faith-based organizations, they're looking for partners that provide exactly what gardens can provide, right? Like a consistent, high quality experience for volunteers that helps the volunteers make them feel like they're doing something really impactful.
Okay, question. Well, if you're selling, because part of what I'm doing is trying to have a vendor lot. And so the experience would be more than just working in a garden. It would be working in a garden and uh, selling to the neighborhood. And so I'm not sure what range of work can they do.
Actually, volunteers, I mean, there are many, many institutions and businesses that don't require you to be a nonprofit organization. As long as you're doing something good in the community, there's plenty of opportunity out there. If it feels like it's adding value to the community, there's plenty of opportunity.
Okay, great. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so let's go to prospect research. So essentially, prospect research is a fancy phrase to basically say, how do you find money? Where to look? Ideas about products or services that could be profitable in demand, right? So like just generating ideas like, I have a garden. I have these skills. I have a connection to this audience. I'm really good at this, like fill in the blank, right? Ideas about what products or services might be a good fit for your vision are like entirely up to you. But it's great, right, to do market research and ask friends. And, when you have an idea, essentially look at similar ideas around the country and how are they, what are they charging for their product or their service? How are they advertising? Just to generate ideas until something really feels like you want to try it out. Low to no interest loans or lines of credit. Some of these budgets that we looked at today, my best advice would be a low interest credit card. Get that cash flow starting and then pay it off as your upfront costs are covered and your bills are being paid from the services that you've given. Business development and incubation programs. Detroit really has no shortage of business development and incubation programs. Some of the more well-known ones, stuff that's happening at Tech Town, Prosperous, Build. Please feel free to share your experiences with, other programs like that. Friends and family, right? Most donations actually come from individuals by far. That's not super intuitive because a lot of people think grants, but by far the largest sector of donations comes from individuals. There's local businesses, even local businesses that seem that are in the neighborhood that don't seem super profitable, tend to be very, very generous to folks doing good in the neighborhood. There's mutual benefit for great projects like gardens that add so much value to communities, from local businesses. So there's also online and research at the library. Librarians are super, super knowledgeable about like grant seeking and finding like online grant online or application-based grant opportunities. And then I have this prospect research list that you all will, I think you're getting a link to it right now. Can you see, oh, my screen sharing is paused. So I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna share. Okay, so this is what that looks like. So essentially, this is something that we update all the time internally at KGD. When we hear about opportunities that might really be a good opportunity for the community groups that we work with. So some of them are grants, some of them are in kind, some's technical support. But let's just go over a couple of them. This is a perfect example. I don't know about perfect. I did it, so I don't want to say perfect, but this is a good example of what your prospect research sheet should look like. Essentially, once you start kind of brainstorming, okay, what do I need? Where am I going to get it from? Let me get on the internet and do some research. Let me talk to my librarian and do some research. Let me talk to a friend and do some research. You're going to create a document like this. So in the document, you'll say, the type of opportunity, the kind of range of support, the name of the funder, what they fund, what the eligibility requirements are, what the deadline is. The more specificity, the better. Links or other information. And so you have, there's quite a few in here. You have everything from Ooh, this is a good one. This City of Detroit Small Grants to Detroit Neighborhood Block Clubs Association, nonprofits and small businesses. Again, guys, like you don't have to be a nonprofit to get some of these startup costs covered. $500 to $15,000 from the City of Detroit. The eligibility is remove blight, provide new recreational opportunities, home repairs for seniors, right? Like basically every single one of our business budgets could maybe be covered partially by this. The deadline is spring and there's a link to it. So the Black Farmer Land Fund, most of you probably know about that. Then there's things like design services. There's things like fruit tree planting and orchards. There's things like kids gardening supplies. There's things like seeds. This one's there. So many corporate groups like Patagonia and Lush have great community giving programs, and their eligibility requirements are things like up to $15,000. So they're looking for like super micro, startup community initiatives, and there's so many of these things out there. There's some federal opportunities, the NRCS. We work really, really closely with NRCS, and Keto and T can answer your questions about NRCS opportunities. Again, there's multiple opportunities for rain gardens, rain barrels, playground equipment, kids gardening supplies, beekeeping. I didn't get all the way finished with doing this one, but did you know you can rent tools at Carhartt? Like we're talking pretty much any tool you can think of for free. And then English Gardens, we just added this one, I think yesterday, but there's English Gardens, the nursery that's in the burbs has a community giving program. So we keep this link. We go back to it all the time and update it. But that should give you a pretty good example of like how to put together your own prospect list. What I would recommend is like, again, like this work is never quote unquote finished. It's like this living work, right? And so sometimes you're going to be scrolling on your phone in the morning and you're going to find an opportunity. And like if you have a Google list, then you can just add it to the Google list and come back to it like when you're getting serious about like, okay, I have a need for, some teaching supplies for my youth program. Let me go back to my prospect research list and see, what's coming up that's a good fit where I might be able to, put in a request.
Mhm. Okay,
Any
you got a
questions
couple
about that?
questions. Yeah, so folks are saying what an amazing list. Thank you for sharing, and I will tell you that that is awesome resource because if you're a nonprofit or for a profit and you're looking for resources like that, people pay a little bit of money for that prospect research. So just so you know, if you might contract with someone to do some grant writing for you, and the first thing they'll probably do is do some prospect research for you, and that might cost some money. So yeah, it's a great resource. A couple questions here. One from Merle says, any grant funding ideas for paying off small loans we take from friends or ways to approach paying off initial debt quickly?
Oh, okay. Paying off initial debt quickly. So debt is a hard one. So that is a hard one. Honestly, Merle, what I would do is I would put your debt in your budget and then sell your project with its debt to a funder, and then um, then just keep it moving, right? So essentially, use your earned revenue to pay off your debt and raise money for the new items on your list. So this is the perennial problem, is that funders want new, sexy, new, and they're not interested in hearing like, hey, I worked really hard to get this off the ground, and I'm kind of struggling to pay off some of my bills. That's like a total downer, and that's like, again, going way back to vision, right? Like it's your storytelling, and so you want to have the story focused on the future and what's new. This is just the nature of the game, but you want to be savvy and build your debt into your budget and have a plan to pay off your debt, maybe with your revenue. Does that help?
Mhm. Any other questions about that, Merle? Is that, you know, there's also, transferring debt to different cards with lower interest and things like that. But that might not be, um, that's a game as well.
Yes.
Um,
So we're going to go over the difference between restricted income and unrestricted income. And when you have that unrestricted income, then you can do things like pay off debt. And a lot of revenue, like earned revenue, is unrestricted income.
mhm. Okay, Merle said that makes sense. And then Yannicka wanted to know, she said this list is mind blowing. And where do you suggest searching for grants like this? Like, where do you even look?
Oh,
So you
that's a
mentioned the
good question.
librarian, but
Yeah, so I think it depends on which stage that you're at. So sometimes you can really get caught up in like um in like the high profile grants. Like a lot of people know Kellogg, for example. But and that's like, when you can get into like a 20,000+ request. But they fund nationally. It's whenever you have a national funder that has a high profile, that usually means it's highly competitive. And you really need to be building a track record for some time before you start to really be eligible and on that playing field. It's not always the case. Sometimes it's like who you know, but generally, you want to match your prospecting to your current capacity. Put stuff on your prospects, for that strategic thinking, that strategic plan, but like, actively be working prospects for your annual plan. So make sure that you have, you're kind of looking, you're looking at at opportunities that match your current capacity. I don't know what's safe to assume about where the majority's current capacity is, but oftentimes like things like um, so there's some city programs like this, the one on the prospect list, that as long as you have a track record, like your block club's really active and you do you do a couple events really successfully every single year, that's like, again, that lived experience, even though maybe it wasn't as a nonprofit or as your current business, but the lived experience really kind of speaks volumes. It's adds a lot of credibility. uh, um, it's amazing, like most of the stores that are there, Home Depot, Target, Meijer, you go to the customer service desk and ask about their corporate giving policy, and usually, I mean, it is not hard to get like a couple of $100 here and there. Sometimes it's in store credit, and sometimes it's like, in some other form. It's just like, I guess it's sort of like gardening. Like before you're a gardener, you don't really see the world. You see the world as like just one color of green. But then when you become a gardener, you see all the shades of green, and you like just see it, you know, in all of its kind of nuance. Once you start fundraising, like you don't go into a Target without thinking like, oh, I wonder what their community giving program is and who they give to. And like when you're purchase something online, like if you go down to the bottom of the way bottom of the homepage, oftentimes there's this little link that's like community giving program, and you get in the habit of like, let me just see what their community giving program looks like. So it's just kind of building the muscles is what I would recommend.
You just said a lot there, and I want to make sure that didn't get anything that you said just got lost, because I feel like a lot of some smaller organizations, like as you're developing, like everybody wants to go for the 20, 25K, 50K grants, without necessarily having, established the track record, right? So in some ways that you can establish that track record are not necessarily all monetary. Some of them are like starting with these smaller funding opportunities. Okay, we got 5,000 last year, because funders are going to ask this, like, what is your annual budget, and what, what did your funding look like in the last 6 months? They may ask something like that, or over the last year, and who were your donors and things like that. So I think like establishing that track record is just such an important thing, and there are multiple ways to do it. So I just thought that was a great point. And another kind of way to do it is to partner with someone who does have a track record, right? So so I'll take the example, like with Black to the Land. We partnered with a number of organizations, and then that looks really good for us, because we're joining in partnership, and a funder's like, okay, I can see that they are trustworthy, basically, almost similar to credit, I guess, like that. So anyway, I just wanted to mention, like, don't be afraid to start off small and work your way up in the grant world, because those couple of years of those small grants, really look good to a funder, and they let the funder know that you can handle that kind of money, right? You know what I mean? Like, and that you have things in place, accounting in place, you have things in place to be able to handle 20 plus K, 30 plus K, in funding.
Yeah. And don't forget about social capital. Like, if you're able to say, like, we have, this many members, or, this many, subscribers to our e-newsletter, and there's this level of engagement, and like, look at this event we threw and 500 people showed up. That's almost as important as, like, a paper trail and a financial statement, with some of those, like, more traditional things. I think, like, the one really, really exciting and positive change in philanthropy is that that lived experience, and like, informal work is starting to be not only recognized, but in some cases valued at a higher level than the more kind of traditional things. It's a really, really good, I think, trend in philanthropy. And again, it's like, going back to that storytelling, that that vision full of excitement and passion, the ability to really get people out, that speaks volumes for the capacity of a group.
All good points. You did have one or two questions in the chat. D dropped a grant opportunity. Thank you, D. And then Tish, my personal and business expenses are mixed together. How do I start to separate them?
That's a great question, Tish. So some of the previous business classes did speak to that. I want to think the one that Greg did about, like, choosing your business type I think did a pretty good job of that. But yeah, essentially a budget is a great way to do that. So I would definitely, if you don't have a business budget, I would do one immediately, and I would watch that class, because not only does it start to talk about, like, and selecting an entity type, and, like, how to like, there's this part of it that was like if you're starting up an LLC, and you own the land personally, or you own some of the assets personally, your business can charge rent. You can charge your business rent, and, like, have additional income that way. So there's some really good tips in that one.
Great point. And then TC, hopefully that'll answer your question. I did put the link to that video with Greg up top, and it is on our YouTube page. But TC said, as a nonprofit, can you put in a budget for a grant writer?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The yes. I will say that when you're starting out, it's quite easy to take care of, like, funders really love to cover supplies. Like, I wanna be the people who buy seeds and, a trowel for the kids, right? And they're not as excited for things like, the adults that are required to supervise, and create the activities. And so there's some hypocrisy there, for sure. But yeah, definitely don't be like, we all know that none of this work gets done unless there are people there, like, committing the time and energy to see it through, and having a plan where that labor is not only daylighted, so you know what it is, but that it's actually paid is important, right? Like we're doing sovereignty and justice work, and you know, we can't do good sovereignty and justice work if people are not getting paid for their very, very valuable time and expertise. And just remind funders that, make sure in your narrative you say that, so that if they start going down the line like, I want to pay for seeds and not people, that that you're reminding them that justice work requires people being paid for their time. Okay, so we're gonna start getting into some of the kind of nitty gritty for fund development, but I want to just state first, you know, look within the community for those resources and connections, rather than, you know, outside of the community, for a couple of reasons. One, there's a very, very strong and special food ecosystem here, with lots of individuals with talent and skills, and lots of organizations that are ready to help. And so, just using Keep Growing Detroit as an example, as a garden resource program member, you can get almost all the seeds and plants that you need to have a garden: compost, raised bed, soil testing, mulch, row cover, trellis, tomato stakes. Like, you know, it's okay to put those things in your budget, but like, only put above and beyond. You know, if you get 1 cubic yard of compost from GRP and you need 3, you know, put 1 in as in kind, and we're going to go over what that is in a second, and then, you know, 2 in as you need to raise money for. This starts to create leverage, right? Like, there's a slide coming up that basically, you know, says like, nobody wants to be the first to the party. And if you join the GRP and you have all of these things that we're contributing to your project, you can say, hey, we're 75% of the way there. We just need you to get us across the finish line with that 25%. A lot of people don't, you know, remember or realize or know we also do site visits. We help with site design and site activation. We have capacity building efforts like Urban Roots, the Build program, beekeeping, medicinal plants, cooking, food preservation, tons of capacity building. We help with supporting and navigating policy and accessing land, access to markets through Grown in Detroit. There's the fruit sale, the Little Orchard program, if you're interested in establishing an orchard. If you need water, rainwater collection, and coming in, and hopefully, fingers crossed, in the near future, we'll be able to help with things like water spigots and hydrant meters. We help with high tunnels, native plants, and hopefully coming soon, we'll also be able to help with a little business support. So, you know, if you need help with that logo design, for example, and it's the barrier, it's a thing that like you need to take your business to the next level, hopefully we'll be able to help with some of that stuff in the upcoming years. So again, types of funding: loans. So there are numerous low interest and no interest loans or forgivable loans. For example, the High Tunnel Initiative from the Natural Resource Conservation Service of the USDA is, it's a, you know, you get a grant, you get the structure built, and then they pay you back. And in some cases, they have upfront funds available. A CDFI, if you are a for-profit business and you've done your budget and you really need some upfront capital, you know, $10,000 or above, look into local CDFIs. There's one in Ohio that works in our region called Anchor Bank, and they do some pretty low interest loans. CDFI basically is an entity that it has to do community-based work with really, really low interest loans. Earned revenue. Gardens and farms can earn money selling produce, merchandise, hosting events. You know, pro tip is just make sure that it aligns with your vision and mission. But don't be afraid of that, right? Nonprofits and for-profits can earn revenue. For nonprofits, it just has to be mission-related earned revenue. Individuals and business donations. So crowdfunding and or cultivating individual donors is a great way to raise money, or in kind time or resources. We're going to go over that a little bit more. family, private, and community foundations. They vary in size and scope, but most have trustees that determine the direction and make decisions. So you're going to be able to find those in like there's all sorts of like foundation directories. They usually have to pay big money for them, but they're almost always all at the main branch of the Detroit Library, and the librarians love to help you kind of navigate those directories. So it's definitely worth spending an afternoon just checking that out. Corporate donations can come from marketing and or community giving programs. Giving priorities usually align with the corporate interests. And corporate donations, especially if they align with your interests, can be an amazing way to both get resources and volunteers. And in some cases, you can develop really long, great relationships with corporate groups, business groups. Government contracts, there are lots of local, state, and federal entities that have grant and loan programs to advance public priorities. So individual contributions, again, most donations in this country come from individuals. It's a myth that it's foundations. The beautiful thing about individual donations is that they are usually, one, unrestricted. So that means that you could use the money to do what you need to do, whatever your gap is, you can cover your gap with it. Probably the most important part of individual contributions is that once somebody is like a donor and a stakeholder, that's a relationship. And as long as you maintain and manage that relationship, they tend to donate annually or even, set up recurring donations monthly or bi-monthly. It's just a really, really, it's like it's one of those quality over quantity things, right? Like you build a quality relationship with an individual, and it's gonna show up for you and your organization for a really, really long time. But if you take the time and you build a relationship with a foundation, you might get a lot of money all at once, but it might be a one and done, and you'll never see them again. So kind of when you're prospecting, just kind of think of that. Sites like IOB, IOBY, IOB, or GoFundMe are super, super easy platforms to start doing like campaigns. So if you do have, like using our budget examples earlier, our tea maker needed that dehydrator, right? And it cost $2,500. So you could, basically, if you have a great online presence, really good social media engagement, a lot of friends and family, you can create a GoFundMe page for a dehydrator, and it could be funded in a month from individuals that are wanting to do something just like that. Kiva is also kind of a forgivable or low interest loan option for businesses, and that's also a great opportunity for stuff like that. Start forming relationships before asking for money and make sure that your pitch is compelling. We've just talked over and over again about that. Keep stakeholders engaged with thank yous. If you're a nonprofit, donation receipts. There are rules for donation receipts that you should check out if you haven't already and you're a nonprofit. E-newsletters, e-blasts, social posts, ongoing planning. You could definitely have stakeholders engaged in like helping you through an event. You could have them to the garden for a garden, a garden tour or a garden party. You can even, put them on the board and, help have them help with things other than just monetary. In-kind contributions are not cash, but they're time and goods coming from individuals and businesses. So in-kind time it's not taxable, but it does have value. In 2021, an hour of volunteer time in Michigan was valued at $26.93 on average. So this is something like when you're trying to build a relationship with a funder, if you have 100 volunteers that donated 1 hour last year, you can say, we had 100 volunteers and the value of their volunteer labor was $2,600, almost $2,700, which is not nothing, especially if you're starting out. It shows your capacity. For in-kind goods, you can give, if you're a nonprofit, you can give a donation receipt for the fair market value. That's something that they can write off. But many donors, they don't even care about being able to write something off. They just really want to be a part of something they believe in, and that, kind of sparks spark something in them. So either way, if you're not for profit or you're for profit, and you're seeking in-kind goods or services, just make it clear, right, with a donor what your status is and what the expectation is before you accept. Restricted funding versus unrestricted funding. We've covered this a little bit, but I just really want to get this in front of everybody because it's super, super important. So whenever you're kind of seeking out grants or donations, you really want to understand whether they are restricted grants or donations or unrestricted grants or donations. Restricted grants means that you're required to use the funds in a specific way for a specific purpose. The arrangement is generally considered a contract between the donating party and the receiving party. Unrestricted funds, otherwise known as the unicorn, are grants, loans, and donations. Earned income is an unrestricted generally that may be spent at as the organization needs or fits with no restrictions. So if you're applying for a grant and the funds that you're receiving are restricted, remember that budget. If you were to submit that budget for the garden, and you didn't use the funds in the way that you said you would for like the adult stipends for the youth, like let's say you didn't get the GDYT funds, and so you can't have a youth program, and so there's nothing for the adults to supervise. That's like a big change in what you were planning to do. You cannot use the funds for something else. You have to go back to the funder and be like, oops, we didn't get the GDYT funds and we can't do the program as we thought we could. Can we work together to come up with something else? And it's not a good look. So just be very careful. The other thing, I want to make sure that people feel that know the language and know about our reimbursement-based funds. So reimbursement-based funds are when a business has to spend the money before invoicing for the goods or services produced, and they're required to submit receipts as proof of spending in order to be reimbursed. Payment could take weeks, months, or longer. So many USDA grants, for example, are reimbursement based. And so they, on a quarterly basis, you have to do the work you proposed, spend the money you proposed, then submit a report with proof of all of the expenses and an invoice for the expenses. And then they have to receive the report. They have to approve the report. They have to process the payment, and then the payment hits your bank account, often taking at least a month, and in some cases 3 or 4 months. So, if your agreement with USDA is for $100, that's not that big of a deal to float for the government. But if you if you consider yourself lucky for getting $100,000 USDA grant, remember that you likely have to come up with $25K, to just start, recouping any of the money that you were quote unquote granted.
Mm.
This all making sense?
Yeah, scary stuff there. There was a couple questions in the chat before we move too far along. So Tish said, how did you get a business credit card for those startup costs? Or do you have to get a personal credit card?
Yeah, so maybe this was covered in the business class, but you should figure out your entity type, and you should essentially do all the paperwork so that the business is a separate entity and the business has a bank account. And then as the business, you would apply for whatever line of credit you're interested in getting. And typically there needs to be some track record for that approval process to take place. So don't rush into anything, make sure it's the right thing for you, but when you feel ready, step out. Really do your due diligence with getting that entity set up correctly, and start doing business, start small, work up a track record, and then then you're going to be in a good space to get those those credit requests in.
Awesome. And then D asked, and you may be talking about this upcoming, but it says, how do you calculate the value of volunteer hours? Does it vary per organization, or are those values strictly given to us by the state?
So that's a great question. You just Google it. So the state has a volunteer valuation rate every single year. So if you Google 2022 state of Michigan value of volunteer service, you're gonna get a couple of different sites that have that number, and they're likely will be consistent. There may be a little inconsistency, but that's how I do it.
Okay, and then just for those who may not have followed that, what is why would you want to have a value for your volunteers? I'll just ask.
Great. So you want to have a value because when you're starting out, you want to be able to demonstrate the capacity in any way, shape, or form that you can. It takes money to get money. So you want to have a track record. You want to have stakeholders engaged. You want to have some experience utilizing money, making decisions as a group, and you want to start to leverage things in order to get other things. So volunteer effort is definitely one of those things that you can leverage to say, dear funder, I've already got 100 volunteers committed for the shed building event that we need, that we're hosting in our community. 100 volunteers working for 4 hours is valued at, do the math. So let's say that number's $10,000. So I've already engaged enough volunteers to put the shed up, valued at $10,000, the labor. All I need from you is $2,000 for the material. And see how that sounds like, oh, well, I'm getting them across the finish line. I'm a hero. That's that is this game, unfortunately. Does that make sense?
Yep, that's the game. Any other questions about that before we move on? And I know there was questions about still accessing that budget doc. So before we get off, we'll make sure that everyone has access. But we can keep going.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So funders want to support impactful strategies. So when you're doing prospecting, one of the important factors that you're looking for is eligibility. You do not want to do all the work to putting a request together and then get an email back saying, actually, we don't fund people in Michigan, or actually, we don't fund gardening at all. We do homelessness. Usually the eligibility is pretty clear, and some of the things, the nuances that you're looking for, like the entity type. So do they only fund nonprofits, or do they only fund for-profit businesses? Geographic location. So, do they only fund Illinois and not Michigan? The size of the organization, just like with that example with Lush, they only fund organizations up to $15,000 operating expenses. So if you have an operating budget of $17,000, you are not eligible. And then sometimes there are requirements in the application process, like they require an audit, or they require audited financial statements, or they require that you're an all volunteer organization, or that you have staff, or that your budget's over $1 million. You just really want to look really closely at the eligibility requirements so that you just don't waste your time, and document that stuff really well in your prospect sheet, because like I said, if you spend a little bit of time on the front end getting it in your prospect sheet, you're going to to save yourself a whole lot of time when you feel like your back is up against the wall and you have to find something fast. Fiscal sponsor or fiduciary. So this is another kind of piece of vocabulary that's really important in this space. So if if a funder requires a 501c3 kind of nonprofit status for their eligibility requirements, or if they you know you are a nonprofit but you don't have an audit, right? Or you are a nonprofit but you aren't in the right state, right? Like you can get around those things by essentially finding a fiduciary that does meet the eligibility requirements. So essentially what a fiduciary is they become the awardee. So they write the grants, and or oftentimes it's a collaboration in terms of writing the proposal, but they are the main kind of grantee that the funds go through, and then the fiduciary works with the smaller organization typically to figure out like how implementation will go. So for example, IOB, which is, this link at the bottom here, they are known as a crowdfunding source, but one of the other services they provide to their community partners is that they actually will be a fiscal sponsor or a fiduciary for most things, actually. And so they will take the funds on the behalf of the group submitting the project, and they will do the administrative stuff, and basically you can work together to figure out like how the actual implementer will access the funds that they need. But a pro tip is choose your fiduciary wisely. It's always a good rule of thumb to make sure your missions are aligned, and that as much as you can tell, right, from like a GuideStar report or an annual report, or most importantly, your experience with that organization, that they're fiscally responsible. And then, make sure that all the details are worked out in advance about how implementation will work before you apply. Ideally, have those things in writing. And once you find a fiduciary, oftentimes, they can be your fiduciary for multiple things. So one of the things I would look at is like, what is their operating budget? So like if their operating budget is $100,000 and you want them to be a fiduciary for a $5,000 grant, like that's no problem. That's just like another project. It's not that big of a deal. But if their operating budget is $100,000 and you're asking them to be a fiduciary for $100,000 grant, if they say yes, I would be very scared, because basically your money will double their size. And what kind of controls do they have in place to like, handle that? That's a big jump for them. And that's, often takes the more funds you have, the more work it is, and the more, just the more process that you have to have in place. So take that into consideration. Also, again, going back to the missions aligned, like if they're like a housing organization, I'm trying not to name names because I don't want everybody to like hone in on one organization, but let's say they're like a community development or housing organization, and their mission is to improve the corner neighborhood, and you're a community garden in the corner neighborhood, and you work with them all the time, right? They offer you meeting space. You guys collaborate on the annual neighborhood pickup. That's perfect, right? Because their mission is to improve the quality of the neighborhood. The garden is doing that, and you already have an established relationship, and you have like points of contact with them that tell you, right, like in your bones, that it's a match made in heaven. So it doesn't have to be another gardening organization, but it should be, again, something that's where your combined work is is just making what you both do exponentially better. Another piece of vocabulary that should be in your repertoire is request for proposals. So oftentimes funders will have like a new kind of grant program and put out a request for proposals for folks interested in applying. So, for example, the example that I gave with the city on the prospect list about the $500 to $15,000 grants that should be happening sometime this spring. A lot of times they'll do an annual request for proposal. So they'll basically do a launch and they'll have a document that basically lays out the purpose of the grant program, the amount of funding available or the range of funding, the eligibility requirements, the key dates, which will include things like the date the proposal is due, the date that decisions are made, the date that all the money has to be spent. So you got to make sure you fit within those dates. They'll lay out the proposal requirements, so the questions that need to be answered with oftentimes a word or character limit, and then any required attachments. They'll also do a scoring criteria. And these days, again, in an effort to make philanthropy more accessible to folks with lived experience, there's oftentimes webinars or like technical assistance sessions in person or virtually. Definitely take advantage of those. Attend the webinars, take good notes, meet the program officer or the people who are working in the program, ask thoughtful questions. Use it as an opportunity to create a point of contact and to really get a sense of if it's worth your time doing all the work of submitting a proposal. Another important piece of lingo is letter of intent or letter of inquiry, otherwise known as an LOI. So a lot of times, and this is also a good trend in order again to save value and save people's time. A lot of times they won't have an RFP process or really even, have like an open grant program, but they'll just accept things on a rolling basis. And the way that you kind of initiate contact to see if you can apply is through a letter of intent. So a letter of intent is a brief summary of your organization, typically your mission, your project, what you're seeking support for. So everything we talked about at the beginning, right? It's all there. If you do the work of figuring that out and writing it down and having a budget, like you will be ready for when these things come. You will be ready. And so what happens is you'll follow the instructions for what an LOI should look like for that entity. You'll submit it. And then they typically get back to you pretty soon to be like, I think you're a great fit. Let's work on a full proposal together. And a lot of times when they do that, they kind of like know where you're coming from and they're like ready to help you. They're it's kind of like you're there. They're providing technical assistance to make sure you're successful with your application, which I think is great. Also, I think it's great when they say, actually, you're not a fit and there's no way we're going to fund you, because then all you did was this 2-page document and not a 36-page document that takes you 5 days. So it's actually a good thing. Once you write a letter of intent and an RFP or a full proposal, the first one is the hardest, guys. Like it's really, really hard to like figure out what you want to say and how you want to say it succinctly. But once you do one, you can like riff on it, improve it, recycle it, and it gets easier and easier. Also, once you start cultivating relationships with funders, like they're just people, and over time they get to know you better. They become your advocates. They help you. They help you course correct if you need it. They're there for questions. They become sort of cheerleaders for you and for your work. And so cultivating relationships is really, really an important part. Generally the person you're cultivating relationships with are the program officers. They generally welcome questions. It's a great way to connect. Be prepared for the conversation. Do not ask questions that are clearly answered in the RFP or on their website. And then just remember foundations are similar to other organizations and businesses and navigate accordingly. So even though you're creating a relationship and it should be, genuine, you want to, you want to present yourself professionally and not get, too friendly.
Quick question before you go too far. Question, is an MOU the same as an LOI?
No. So an LOI is the beginning of the process. It's like, are we going to date? Yeah, it's kind of like, do our profiles match? And an MOU is way down the pipe, and it's essentially once you've decided that you're going to do something together, an MOU lays out the rules of engagement. Does that make sense?
Yes. I think so. Yep.
An MOU stands for Memorandum of Understanding. So essentially it lays out like Ashley and Tia are entering into this memorandum of understanding to get to work tomorrow morning. In order to get to work tomorrow morning, Ashley will set the alarm clock and drive the car, and T will open the door, and you know what I mean? Like it sets out like how you are going to accomplish something together. Typically an MOU with a funder is the funder will pay and the grantee will do.
Yep. And I know you can also have MOUs with your partner in the grant, right? So
Absolutely.
GC said thank you.
Of course. Okay, so common proposal elements. This is repetition, guys, because the stuff we started with is where we're ending up. Common proposals, and I would definitely, even if you're not to the point where you're ready to apply to something, I just for fun, would definitely start with like the vision and the project plan and the budget. That'll help you really get your ideas on paper. But once you think you're ready for seeking a grant or seeking some loan or line of credit, and those things oftentimes require like formal proposals. A lot of times they're always going to ask for these items, and so to prepare for them, I would recommend doing something that's called a boilerplate proposal, or just like practice or template proposal, something that like essentially is basic, that you can make specific to whatever RFP or LOI that you're applying for. So a boilerplate would include, or most proposals include, an organizational description. So the mission, vision, history, track record, capacity. Again, we've talked about this a lot. The need being addressed. Why is the work that you're proposing important? So going back to our examples, the gentleman who has a raised bed building business, that work is super important because there are, like, we know how much benefit gardens bring to people's lives, and we can cite all types of personal lived experience. It helped me get off my blood pressure medicine. It gave me some way to convene with nature. I love doing it with my grandchildren. But there's also lots of research. Gardening helps people eat more fruits and vegetables and get more exercise. Typically, for whatever your vision is, you'll have to kind of justify that vision with essentially why it's so important, and like get in the practice of like, again, what's the lived experience of you and the stakeholders that you serve, but also what research is out there to substantiate it. Then you're going to have a description of your project, and you want those activities and those outcomes to be, SMART, right? So remember, specific, measurable, attainable. So all of the SMART qualities. I can't tell you, especially with like funders, if they're not smart, they'll come back and be like, um, you say you want to do raised beds, like how many raised beds? And if they're coming back to get that, specificity, it's not a good thing. And then the implementation plan. So again, those action steps, the timeline, documentation of community, the ways that you're serving stakeholders and collaborating in community, right? Like community collaboration is one of those things that will help build your capacity and build your credibility if you're connected to a lot of people. I can't even tell you like how just simply saying like when you're applying, like that you're a garden resource program member, and so much of the resources that you need for your gardening are coming through Keep Growing Detroit, or you took Urban Roots and you graduated from Urban Roots. Like you wouldn't believe how many funders out there know Urban Roots and actually value it as, demonstrating capacity. Your evaluation plan. So evaluation plan is just, your plan to know how you actually did what you said you were going to do. So for the gentleman who has the raised bed building business, he has a before photo of, one of the sites that he built with, a vacant lot. And then he has an after video after the raised beds have been built and, that's into the growing season. It's like visually super transformative. It doesn't have to be your evaluation plan any more complicated than that. It could be a simple before and after photo, but it could also be surveys for stakeholders who benefited from what you're doing. It could be, Yelp reviews if you're a business, right? Like there are all kinds of ways for you to measure your success. And again, evaluation is something that I love to do. And, we do a lot of at Keep Growing Detroit, and we're always willing to help you brainstorm. And then of course your budget. So you want to definitely detail your project and operating expenses. And then, if you do have matching funds, make sure that it's really clear, right? That again, they're not the first coming to the party. So common attachments. So this is, it starts to feel really big when you look at especially some of the big funders, like what they require in order to be eligible for the opportunity. Audited financial statements generally run around $10,000 a year. So and almost everybody that I know that funds 50K or more requires audited financial statements. So if you're spending 10K on an audited financial statement and the grant is 50K, and oftentimes, they're like, if part of your proposal is $10,000, so a fifth of the proposal, 20% going to, is that 20%? The fifth of the proposal going to an audited financial statement, like it's not a good look. So that's when you might want to consider, like, is this a right opportunity for me, or is there a fiscal agent, or can I think about my strategic plan for how I get to a place where I have an audited financial statement in 5 years. Budget narrative. So it's as simple as that right column in the budget template that was saying, like, for mileage, 29 trips at 20 miles per trip at 62.5 cents, right? Like that's what budget narrative is. Your 501c3 designation letter, which is the federal letter that you receive when your 1023 is approved. Letters of commitment or support from stakeholders, list of board of directors. Typically, they're looking to make sure that the board of directors is reflective of the organization. Honestly, sometimes they're looking to see who's the who of the board of directors. So it doesn't really matter, but if you're a nonprofit, having a legitimate board of directors and a board governance is quite important. And a lot of people start nonprofits thinking that it's going to be like a fast route to free money, and they don't think of it for two things. One, that there needs to be governance in place because it's a public organization, it's serving a public good, so it needs to have governance, and the rules of the governance need to be followed. And then two, a lot of people don't understand that like you do not own a nonprofit organization. So at any time, you could be committed 10 years of your life and put every creative like ounce of energy that you have into the development of a nonprofit organization. And all of a sudden, your board of directors thinks that they need to go in a new direction and do something new or with somebody new, and you're out, and your organization keeps moving, and you're not there anymore. So you're like, you don't have equity, you don't like that by nature, you are not the sole decision maker at any point because you have a board of directors. So, just keep that in mind, especially if, the work you're proposing is like so much you and so much of your effort and so much of your creativity. Just think about that in the long run. Staff bios and resumes, sorry about that. List of funders. Again, a lot of foundations and funders, want to know who else is funding. Organizational chart and cover letter. So common attachments. We covered some record keeping and evaluation. Just to note, qualitative evaluation tools include things like photos, quotes. Quantitative would be things that turn into numbers. So sign-in sheets turned into, the number of volunteers that you have, survey results. You can put measures in there to say we're 5 stars, and produce weight is another example of quantitative evaluation tools. You want to make sure to keep grant file agreements on file and put report deadlines in a calendar. Retain records for 3 years. I think, okay, there's 2 more. Leverage, we talked about this, but just as a reminder, nobody likes to be the first to the party. Be prepared to tell supporters who else has invested in your success so that they can feel like their time and resources is being amplified or contributing to something bigger. And then finally, final thoughts. Healthy organizations and businesses maintain a diverse mix of revenue sources and cultivate long-term relationships with stakeholders and funders of all type. So secure multiple rather than single sources of funding. Always evaluate, are these still working for me? Do I need to try new things? Do I need to expand this, double down on this? And most importantly, avoid the trap of selling yourself short, selling short-term projects to funders. Real change is complicated and takes a long time. We don't do anyone justice when we pander to funders. That's it.
Wow. That was a lot of information, a lot of great information. We are right at 8 o'clock, but is there anyone who has any burning questions or things that they would like to say before we go? I keep hearing takes money to make money. Can't
Yeah.
get it.
Also there's Biggie Smalls, more money, more problems, which is nothing's truer.
Yes. Yeah, so these are the songs that are in my head as we're going. TC had a question, and there was one in the chat. TC,
Yeah, I
did
see
you
it.
wanna?
So is it a good idea to send a letter to a grantor if you did not get the grant to say thank you? I think so. I think it's always good. It's totally fine for you to say like, I'm new at this. Like, I really appreciate your time, the time you took to, consider this. I'd love to hear, if you have any notes for me. I think it's generally totally fine. And again, like, I can't tell you how many, how many program officers, how many funders out there want you to be successful. So they're willing to like help work with you as you build your capacity, and hopefully one day, you'll get there.
All right. Yep. TC said thank you. Linda said thank you. Benjamin said thanks for all the info. Trav said that was awesome.
I'm gonna try this link one more time for the budget tea.
Oh yes, before we go, Yvonne say appreciate the tips. Yannicka, thank you so much. Will this be on your private YouTube? Yes. Yep, and our YouTube should be public, so you should be able to go there anytime. And I usually make a best practice of sending the video and any of the spreadsheets and things that were along with this class. I'll try to make sure to get that out to the participants who registered. So that should be coming your way, and they're also always on our website as well. Ashley's working on making that document public for whatever the reason was that was not coming up for folks.
Okay, I think I got it. I'm gonna put it in the chat again. Will somebody check just to make sure they have access to it?
Yep, if someone else can check because I did have access, and I think it was because it might be a
Oh,
document that we
it
use.
looks like people are getting in it.
Okay, all right, good.
So I'm just gonna do a quick little for those that want to have a little tour of it. So this is we actually use this document internally, guys. So it works for us. Feel free again to do file, make a copy, and make it your own. You have the narrative here, but then you have your cash flow budget too. So with a lot of these projects, cash flow is the key to making it work. So you can hold off on some purchases until you have some cash flow coming. Then you have to make some decisions about the things that have to be startup costs for you. So cash flow is going to be super, super important. And then we have this budget tracker here too, so you can enter what was raised, what you're spending over time. So essentially, like basically, if you so if this is $100 and you have $50 here. So if you have 0 in January, your variance is always your problem. Your problem is you need $100, but in January somebody gave you 50, so your problem just turned into 50. And then in February somebody gave you 50, so you're good to go. And then in March somebody gave you 50, and so you actually have a little to play with. So hopefully that helps with folks. And then notes some of our staff just love the notes because they basically just start entering like so for example, like we, as you know, we use a lot of like those wooden tongue depressors for transplants. So they'll write tags, plant tags, and then they'll vendor, somebody mark, and then the SKU order, so we could order them quickly, and then we can do some like cost comparisons. So we need so the cost is $10 a box. We need 10 boxes, so it's 100. And then the timing, we need them by January, so hopefully that's helpful too. So
all good information. Yeah, in the chat you got thank you, and so many resources, valuable information. Ashley, thank you for your time today, and I loved the direction that you took with the presentation. Appreciate it. Really good. TC, you still have your hand raised. Did you have another question? We're gonna stick around for maybe 5 or 10 more minutes just to make sure that any questions are answered. TC, did you have a question or?
Yes, I do have a small question, please. And thank you both very much. For beginning nonprofits, is there any software or any type of what do they call it, accountant, that it can be helpful to help them to get started? Because I know having an accountant is very important, and having compliance with the taxes is very important. So is there some type of software that doing this process, it'd be a lot easier to save with taxes, and also find a pro bono or some type of low cost but efficient accountant? And thank you.
Yeah. So the when you're starting up, Excel is going to be, is going to be all you need. But when you're ready to have things like a chart of accounts and like start tracking things and and doing financial statements, the tool that a lot of people go to is QuickBooks. There are a lot of other kind of similar softwares to QuickBooks. Um, I would suggest Googling QuickBooks or programs like QuickBooks, and you'll get a number that you can kind of demo. A lot of them will give you like a free demo for a month, so you can kind of try it out and see if you like it. And you might like one or the other. So I'd highly recommend that. They're pretty intuitive, but like you said, it's always helpful to like have an accountant help you set things up and kind of get going. It's really intimidating, even for me. Like it's super intimidating the first time you do any of this stuff, and so definitely don't feel like you're alone. Like I can't. Like the first time I did our tax like 990 form, I was like, oh, what is this? Like, but after you get it, the first one done, it's so much easier. So after you get, your chart of accounts built, and after you get your first financial statement done, it's so much easier. And using a local accountant like Unicorn, Greg, that was the instructor on two of the classes that he held, local accountant, I think does a lot of that kind of work, would be a good option.
All right. And I had been playing around with one Wave, which is free. So Wave is an accounting service that's free, like a bookkeeping service. Yep. Okay. Well, we are over time, and if there's no other questions, thanks for your time, Ashley. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Once we get past our budgeting season, Ashley really does like to consult with people. You can drop your email in the chat, and maybe Ashley, she loves to have one-on-one conversations about your project, and she kind of likes that stuff, right? I'm not speaking for you. You always say that. So yeah, feel free to. I know this is a busy couple weeks as we're getting our budget approved by our board, and so we're in the home stretch of that, but within the next couple of weeks, she'll probably get back with you. So yeah, great to be talking about this. I mean, as we develop as an ecosystem, and there's more small businesses and small nonprofits, like having these understanding of how these inside things work, these administrative things, is just invaluable. So all right. So if there's no other final questions, you can find this recording on YouTube, and we'll get it out as soon as possible. Take care, guys.
Bye, guys.
You guys want to come off of mute and say bye?
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.